Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views on News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the upcoming budget that is supposed to be announced on 10th of June. And a day before that, the Economic Survey of Pakistan, which will be having almost all the data of the complete year and perhaps around 11 months, that is also going to be released. According to the reports, Pakistan has in fact shown considerable growth in various sectors, whether you talk about IT, you talk about agriculture, you talk about industries, or you talk about services. Most of these indicators, despite the fact that the whole world was under this enormous pressure of COVID-19, so many countries literally went bankrupt, so many businesses were shut down, tourism came to an absolute halt, not even a single plane was flying in the air. And just imagine, 17%, I'm going to give you a very interesting figure, that is 17% of the global emissions of carbon that were reduced. Just imagine, this was the kind of, in fact, change which we witnessed over a period of time. Lifestyle changed almost all over the world. But having said that, I think Pakistan did considerably well. Now, when you talk about the growth as far as your construction is concerned, that has been very positive. You talk about the sectors that include health was positive, education was positive, and despite all odds, things were pretty okay. Now, there's a new government in place, regime has been changed, and now this very important phenomena that the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif Saab was in fact talking about yesterday when he was addressing the business community. He said the need of the hour is charter of not democracy, it has been there, but charter of economy. And most of these political parties are on board. PTI needs to be on board, because at the end of the day, the most important factor is about looking after the affairs of Pakistan. I think politics should be kept aside, but when it comes to charter of economy, everybody should put their heads down and start fixing the issues. Now, that is what we really want to see happening. Economic revival, I think political stability is absolutely a prerequisite for the economic revival. When we talk about the bold decisions that the government is supposed to take, whether you talk about increasing the petroleum prices or increasing the rates on tariff, or perhaps certain other very hard decisions that the government is supposed to take. For example, IMF is also saying that the Saturday class should be taxed further. And they also said that the government employees should not get a raise in their wages. But obviously something has to be done. Look at the current inflation rate. That is hovering around 15%. That's what the official numbers are. But a lot of people believe this can go up to 18 to 20%. 13.75% is your interest rate, highest ever, I would say. That will go further up if they want to put a check on the inflation issue. And I think inflation is going to be the major problem in the coming days. If you talk about dollar, 4.25 rupees increase in one day yesterday. So it was available around 207 rupees in the black market, 203 was the official rate. A lot of challenges. How to fix those? I think that is the real challenge for this particular government. But to talk about this, let me quickly introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Shakeel, Ramay, senior economist in our studio. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And we also have with us Ariba Shahid. She is a finance journalist based in Karachi. Ariba is joining us on Skype. Pleasure to have you, Ariba, in the show. Thank you very much for your time as well. Now, Ramay Saab, because you're an expert in the field, this document that is supposed to be presented on the 10th of June, and another very important document that is called the Economic Survey of Pakistan, will be handed over to us on the 9th. But so looking at the various numbers, earlier we were having a chat about this also, most of these numbers were positive. I mean, there is a long list, we can just throw light on that, but most of these economic indicators were showing significant growth in various areas. So that means that the economy, according to the figures that were given by the previous government, they said that 5.97, that is 6% growth is witnessed. Now let's start off from there, sir. 6% growth and they say that Pakistan for the first time has beaten India during the last 15 years because Indian economy was growing at a tremendous rate. But this time, for the first time in 15 years, that Pakistan has crossed that. Your take?
Look, Faisal, first of all, we have to wait for the economic survey. So because we have to look at that, so which are the main driver of this growth? Either the main driver is a consumption or the production. If the production is the main driver of this growth, then it is very good news for the Pakistan. But if it is the consumption, especially consumption we are meeting by importing, that is not a good indicator then, because when this situation would arise, that means our fiscal deficit will increase. Why?
Already it has increased.
So why? Because look at that, if the last year economic survey, if you look at that, there was 93.1% growth rate was coming from consumption sector. That is a real problem for our economy, which don't give us a sustainable development or even sustainable growth. That's we have to wait. So what percentage it comes from the consumption sector? Consumption itself is not a bad if you are meeting your requirement by your own resources. But if you are importing, like in the during the first 9 months of this year, fiscal year, so our total food export was more than $7 billion US, and it is a matter of shame, and we are an agriculture economy. Always we say that. And then look at the bill of our other consumption items. We are fighting over the cat.
4.5 billion for your edible oil.
We are fighting over the cat and dogs import, food import. So that's we giving the push. We had a very good opportunity. Pakistan had a very good opportunity during the COVID-19. Why I say them? In the most of the world, they faced the problem like Bangladesh, India. They were closed down. Pakistan got the extra orders in the textile and the garments. Either we are able to sustain those orders, because the main problem is there the cost of production and the quality surety. That would be the key thing to know that. And there also come one other problem. Was we able to be included in the supply chain of those products, or we just try to fulfill the order one time, next time we will be again looking for the order? So these are the things I think we have to wait. And I share one more indicator with you. Last year, so when the economic survey came, so the PTI government and everybody was saying, oh look, our agriculture production, wheat production has increased. But nobody talked about it was due to the increase in the area of production, not due to the productivity.
The productive yield remained the same.
And we faced the problem in the cotton, because the cotton production decreased, because the area of production decreased. Same as this year, estimate we have for the agriculture, we have to wait for two things, because due to the climate change, the size of grain of wheat has been reduced the weight.
Yes.
Maybe we have to re-estimate our production estimates, what would be the production after carefully analyzing. Maybe 5 to 10% it comes down. With the grain required 10 to 12 days for the maturity, and the climate change gave you only 4 days. Second thing, on the mango production, due to the quick weather change and fluctuations, so it also impacted the production of the mango.
Plus a lot of areas, somebody was telling me that even in Multan, so many areas where there was a lot of mango production,
maybe we
it went down because those areas were allocated for huge societies.
That is separate issue.
DHA in particular.
That is separate issue. I am talking about on the basis of what we are estimating for the production.
I totally agree with you.
So that climate change had brought the serious problem.
Absolutely. So today there was people were gathered in some parts of South Punjab, and they were complaining that there is no water in the canals. Just imagine.
What happened in the Cholistan?
That's
look,
something
last 4 years we celebrated.
Yep.
Last 4 years we celebrated. We are pro climate change. We had a project on climate smart agriculture with the FAO. We were not able to start that project.
Well, there are a lot of issues at various levels. Well, let's talk to Ariba about it. Now, Ariba, according to the reports, the remittances, when you talk about the year-to-year basis from June to June, the remittances should be around 32 billion. So the cases with our exports, and that have shown a lot of increase, perhaps because of the rupee devaluation and also maybe a little bit more output as well. But still, when we talk about the trade deficit, It is believed that it is going to be somewhat around 75 anyway. Imports, there is a check, but I'm not sure how much it is going to be productive as far as the volume is concerned or the number is concerned. But still, having said that, Ariba, you're a financial journalist. You live in Karachi, that is the financial hub of Pakistan. What generally do you make out when it comes to the overall year-to-year basis? Do you agree that 6% growth rate was there and a lot of things were pretty much in control? And if we would have passed this particular year, things would have been a lot better for the next year. Your take?
So the thing with the 6% growth is basically the fact that our country is known to have a boom and bust cycle, where we have a period of growth followed by an immediate bust, and we can see the same thing happening right now as well. Like we had 2 years of growth, and now the economy is in panic mode. The government is putting out fires. The reserves are dwindling. The current account deficit has widened to a great extent. There's increased pressure on the rupee. The situation is getting very intense to the extent that now we've got to ban imports. So this situation of where we're putting out fire after fire is important to note, because the boom-bust cycle is a common trend for Pakistan, and it is time that we move beyond it and we look towards more sustainable growth, which is something that is not possible in light of the fact that governments do not stay in power long enough to make long-term reforms. So that is one concern. But then on the other hand, when we're talking about the current account deficit and the fact that there's a ban on imports and the check on imports, it's very important to know that the imports that we have in the country, luxury goods make up a small percentage of it, and they themselves are a form of revenue for the government in terms of custom duties. But with these bans on imports, not only are you creating another grey economy within the present economy by encouraging smuggling, encouraging KPS to bring in things, you're encouraging a grey economy to develop, and that itself is concerning, because these choices that a consumer has, taking them away, shows that how dire the economic state is at this point in time.
We've also been joined in by Dr. Vaqar Ahmed, again a senior economist. Vaqar sahab, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Vaqar, good to have you on the show. Vaqar, obviously the release of the economic survey of Pakistan is around the corner, maybe day after tomorrow. Now, first of all, sir, when we talk about the digits, I mean, we've done so many programs with you on economy. Now, looking at the current situation, the current scenario, it seems that certain decisions, they are very hard to take, but the government had to absorb that kind of pressure, which they are. For example, you talk about the adjustment in the fuel prices, or perhaps increasing the tariffs of electricity and gas, and not by a certain small percentage, talking about 47% in the case of electricity, 45% in the case of natural gas. Petroleum prices are going to almost get double. People are talking about 270 plus. High octane is going to be around 300 rupees a litre, and that is something to worry about. Now, obviously, Prime Minister believes that we need to set some very optimistic we need to have that optimistic approach, but there should be a lot of challenge for the government. So set those targets which can push you hard to work day and night and eventually achieve those. Now, it's good to have ambitious targets, but I think it's foolish to have over ambitious targets. Let's start off from there, sir.
This is very accurate, and yes, I think your analysis is very accurate, and I believe that there are two main challenges at hand, and the government, of course, is trying to address them. The first one, of course, being the current account, of course, which, of course, is challenged by the very fact that oil prices have increased to an extent where our import bill would be touching or clocking around $78 billion by the time the year ends. So this perhaps is the first challenge, that we need to have very stable foreign exchange reserves which can support these imports. And I think to a lot of extent the non-essential imports, there have been hard brakes which have been put to these non-essential imports. So we are literally at this point trying to manage only the essential imports like of oil, food supplies, essential metals and raw materials. The second challenge, of course, which the government faces is that of the budget deficit. And the fact that inflation, of course, is a global phenomenon now, and it has gone to an extent where, of course, government would like to give some comfort to the population through some targeted subsidy. But that targeting of subsidy has been a challenge on two accounts. One, you are under a fund program and you need to reach that conclusion as early as possible, and fund would not like you to expand those subsidies given that it creates solvency problems and government's fiscal deficit to GDP ratio really crosses bounds. Second issue is that, of course, how does one finance this subsidy in an environment where you don't know how will the global inflation, for example, pan out in the coming days, given that there is a war situation out there which is keeping energy markets very jittery, and predicting anything during such uncertain circumstances becomes a challenge for the government. So for now, I believe that the government is only aiming for a short-term success, which is to bring the fund program back on track.
Well, Ramay Saab, would you like to comment on this point? I mean, the situation isn't that great. Everything seems to be on paper, but when it comes to reality, I think it really needs, a lot of brains working together and then coming up with some sort of a viable solution.
I think it's not about the number of brain, it's about the will. On the one side, you are talking to the people, so we are going through the very difficult situation. That is what the Vaqar was talking about. The situation is very difficult. On the other side, you look at the expenses of the government. You are increasing the number of the ministers and everything other days. So you have to show your seriousness. You want to tackle the issues. If you are not able to even show the seriousness, then be ready to face the wrath of the people. We have the options, and they know it. We have the options. Number one, we have the option in the form of concentrate on agriculture, because that is the only sector which can give.
This sector has been shrinking constantly and consistently for the last 10 years, sir.
Look at that. In the last year, what happened? I have a few numbers. Your vehicle sale has been increased by more than, I think, 300%. Construction and the food items import has increased. So do you want to give this type of computers to your economy? If you look at the vehicle industry, that is assembling unit, they are sucking your dollars. Because when the assembler is sending
because there is a monopoly.
And Prime Minister is meeting them and telling them we will do everything to the assemblers. They are not the businessmen, they are the dealers, like the property dealers. You have to seriously think about, if some Chinese companies are coming in Pakistan, like you have all type of the issues, you will see the campaigns running against them. So you have to decide. One thing, from agriculture you can have this huge imputers. Second, work on the war footing in the special economic zones. Bring the industry. Construct in the short run, from SEZs, construction will give you computers.
Sir, we have been hearing about these special zones from FATA to God knows which area, but the point is that nothing has happened so far. Is it the red tape that is the problem? Is it the political will is that the problem? Or is it the people who do not want to do that? Because if somebody else is making more money in the real estate business, sir,
it's a will.
Good enough.
I think it's a will of the bureaucracy. They have made the CPAC a point of tug of war. Every ministry say it's my baby. For God's sake, if you want to make it a success, do the innovative solutions. There was a study which was conducted why SAZs were successful or failed. So one or two key messages were innovative policy. Second, you need to understand these are the special economic zones. They need a special type of the policies and implementations and the procedures.
Shouldn't be treated like other regular businesses.
I give you one comparison. India started establishing SAZs 2 years before China. Look at the size of Chinese economy and the Indian economy. There is no match. Because they treated special economic zones like the economic zones, special economic zones. And India, like us, they have a lot of bureaucracy. And everybody is feel like that, without me, government cannot sustain. So you need to come out with the solutions if you want. If you want to continue this tug of war, good enough. CPEC authority was really needed, a strong, like in the last government, they created CPEC authority, very good initiative, but they made it as a facilitator, not the implementator or the decision maker. To move the file one, that means you are adding one other layer. You have to make a strong CPEC authority which can make a decision and implement it. But this government is not about to going to, they are saying we will abolish this CPEC authority. They are saying we implemented the first phase of CPEC, so we have the experience. For God's sake, first phase was all about G2G or G2B. Second phase is all about industry, agriculture, the private sector. You know, in Pakistan there are 7 registration agencies. You have to register with 7 companies. On federal you have FBR, and then you have to register with the regional tax authority. There are 35 different types of tax agencies, and then every province they have a different policy of investment.
So what about that one window operation?
What is that? Is nonsense. Then that's what I'm saying. CPEC authority you need. Bring the people there and sit. They can make a decision and implement it. Well, otherwise, you are just feeling like that. And third thing which we have to do it very urgently, innovation in agriculture. Soybean, we can cultivate, we can grow.
So I think Pakistan has the best, land.
We can
to grow
save
so many.
We can save
different.
Yes. We can save a lot of foreign exchange, but we import the cooking oil. Second,
$4.5 billion worth of import.
The largest import market of soybean is in our neighborhood China. There are solutions if they want, but if they say there's a look, they think like that, so they will make fool people like this tall claims. It is not possible.
All right, let's hear out what Ariba has to share with us. Ariba, the government also says that certain measures are being taken in order to facilitate the poor. For example, targeted subsidy is one idea, and they also say that we are doing this to protect the common man from the impact of inflation, but inflation hasn't arrived yet. It is going to come, say, in another 2 to 3 months, and that is where the problem is. How much interest rate can you increase to counter your inflation? Perhaps that is another multi-million-dollar question, because the more interest is going to be there, I mean, less borrowing from the private sector, your economic growth is going to slow down. I mean, everything is interlinked in one way or the other. That is the interesting part. Now, and again, they want that we should target a certain, let's say, 5% of growth, and a pro-poor budget is going to be presented. Now, in the given circumstances where IMF is going to put a check on you, they want you to remove the subsidies, they want you not to increase the pays, they want you to, in fact, tax more and generate your own money for the sake of a budget deficit. Now, don't you think, I mean, the government claim is something different, reality is something different, IMF is asking for something different, because this budget is perhaps one of those budgets where the IMF is going to be as important as the finance minister. Your take, ma'am?
So basically, when we talk about the monetary tightening, so right now we're going through a phase of monetary tightening where the state bank is moving towards a contractionary monetary policy by increasing the policy rates. This is usually done when we have demand pull inflation, and it's done in order to decrease the money supply so that the demand for things goes down and inflation eventually goes down. The country right now does not really have demand pull inflation. Instead, it has cost push inflation. Now, in such a scenario, when the state bank hikes the policy rate, what happens is that the cost of borrowing goes higher, working capital becomes more expensive, and capacity losses are incurred, and then there may also be a round of inflation because of the higher cost of borrowing. Now, on the flip side, what's happening is that while the state bank is hiking up the policy rate, the government is going towards expansionary fiscal policy by giving out these targeted subsidies, by looking out for the common man. In the meanwhile, the state bank is also doing OMOs, open market operations, through which they are giving subsidized lending to the banks, which are then lending to the government, because the state bank cannot lend directly to the government. Now, what's happening is all of this mismatch in policies, where one side you have a contractionary policy, one side you've got an expansionary policy. This mismatch in policy making is terrible for the economy in the long run, especially in terms of how the economy will be perceived. Now, in such a situation, the IMF is the one that is talking sense in all of this because the IMF is forcing the government to take strict measures which are the need of the hour. So, yes, it is absolutely true that in this budget, the IMF is probably more important than the finance minister and probably has a greater opinion, which is of greater value for the government as a whole. But also, it does leave question on the policy making at the state bank as well. Like, how is the state bank encouraging the government to go forward with more expenditure? So, and how government lending is still being done indirectly, thus increasing the government's chances of being frivolous and not moving towards austerity.
Another important point, and that is about obviously every government claims that they have inherited bad economy. Ariba, whether it's true or not, but blame game. This is what I've been witnessing for the last 20 to 23 years, ever since I've been working as a journalist. Now, tell me one thing. When the Prime Minister says that Charter of Economy is something really important, and I do believe that everybody should sit together, despite the fact that they have political differences, but there should be some sort of a concrete measure taken by all the people that look, this is the way forward, and there will be certain rules made. No matter you have 2/3 majority or you have 3/4 majority, these will not be changed. Consistency is the name of the game, because one step forward, two steps back, remove this, remove that, and God knows what's going to happen. At the end of the day, the common man of Pakistan is suffering. That is the problem. And every government can say, we will facilitate the people, we will increase their livelihood, we will provide them with better opportunities. I mean, having this kind of a formula and expecting it to be something like Norway or Denmark, I think that's a very foolish approach. Ariba?
So you're right about the fact that every government that comes in and blames the previous government. And the reason why that happens is because no government in Pakistan's history, no prime minister in Pakistan's history has completed a term. And until we don't have political stability, this blame game will continue to happen. And that is a very much importance. I think 70 plus years, it is high time that we have a government that completes its term. And as far as the rest of what you said I completely agree that this instability is costing the economy, it's costing people, and it's absolutely ludicrous at this point that the policy making is not together. It's not like a conscious effort done by all economic parties, all political parties put together. And that basically shows that political clout, political popularity, and political gains are more important than what the country needs and what the greater good is. So I feel that is a concern, and it shows who our politicians are and what their priorities are.
You wanted to add something, Amisab, and then I'll go to Dr. Vaqar.
I think you can do Dr. after that.
Okay. Dr. Vaqar, now your take on this particular very important point of Charter of Economy.
Faisal Saab, I've had the chance to work on this subject over the past decade or so.
Okay.
At least since the first time Charter of Economy or the term was introduced in the parliament or discussed in the parliament. Dar Saab discussed it, then Asad Umar Saab discussed it. Now, economics by its very definition is a political subject, and it's very hard to reach a consensus given that all political parties have the right to experiment the kind of economic policy they want once they're in power. In fact, they fight for the office in a democratic system based upon the fact that the previous government didn't have an economic policy that was working, and mine will work. So I'm now of the opinion that economics, being the kind of political subject it is going to be very hard for our already very partisan political canvas to really come together and sign up for something, or at least minimum set of indicators on which they would like to stick. But what has happened in the past year and a half is that in some areas, the parliament has done rule-based economic policy, decision-making, legislation, whereby, for example, in the case of managing of fiscal deficit, you now have a more stricter form of fiscal responsibility law, which is called the Public Finance Management Law, which binds the government, goes a step further than Fiscal Responsibility and Debt Limitation Act, whereby there are some punitive measures as well. So one really hopes that Charter of Economy, which may be a loose sort of a set of promises, over time, this thinking is of course good, but over time our parliament frames laws and binds itself to those laws, those economic laws, and I guess that is probably the way forward.
Two things I want to mention. Number one, the Western style of democracy, it has the inherent flaw. The parties will play the politics on an economy. That is the only instrument where they can attract people, what they will get. If you take it out, so there is nothing in their democracy. Number one. Number two, you have seen the practical example. Whatever PTA was doing, Ahsan Iqbal Sahab giving a statement, we started it. So that is the political economy of the subject. Can they forgive it?
Sir, we don't care who started it. At the end of the day, are the people suffering or the people happy?
That's the attitude of these politicians. That's what I'm saying. In the democracy, because they have to contest election on these numbers.
So you think this idea of
I wrote a paper a few days back. On this subject, has been published. Maybe I shared with you also. You can look at that in detail. What we can do. Number two, the fundamental flaw of the capitalism, which we are not looking at this point of time. The political economy of capitalism tells us that the system will create winners and losers, and the state will be responsible to compensate the loser by taxing the winners. But here
it's the other way around.
Other way around. That is the problem which we have to fix.
Who's going to do that?
Yesterday.
You think people will be taxed in the agriculture sector? That's a decision that is not politically correct?
Yesterday, they had a meeting on economy, and all were the businessmen and dealers, not the economic indicator. Only one sector. You are focusing on one business community, but they are the only
Yes, and all these stakeholders were present?
They need to be present. Agriculturists, servicemen, everything will be economic.
There has to be a very comprehensive
approach.
Well thought out plan, yeah.
If you look at what the recommendations give any chamber of commerce in Pakistan, he will collect from all the sectors of the chambers, from pharmaceutical, car, from this textile industry, blah blah industries, and make a huge document and give to the government, do this.
Nothing happens even then.
Because even they don't read themselves. 510.
You expect a bureaucrat to read all those 600 pages?
So you need to come about as a responsible citizens, not just you have to look at. That is a fundamental difference between whole process democracy of China and liberal democracy of the West. We have to fix it, whatever democracy it is.